Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Sarah Glasco. Welcome to the show, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you today?
Thank you, Desiree. I'm doing really well. Thanks.
Awesome. So, Sarah, you are the founder of Mod Couple Publishing and also Sarcrasstic Self Care. And these are a couple things I absolutely want you to share with us and tell us about. But there's something that you've just recently kind of established, and that's Punkpreneur. And I love this. So you're going to have to tell us what this means exactly and how did that come to be. But why don't you start us off by sharing what sort of led you in this direction and tell us more about that.
Okay, I will try to make a long story short. In January 2023, I woke up and I had gotten a good night's sleep, which never ever happened to me. And I was a tenured college professor. I wasn't teaching winter term, so I think that was my first time in a long time not teaching. So I had a little break before the spring semester where I worked started in February or end of January. And I woke up one morning and I had gotten a lot of sleep. And I had this clarity that I never have. And I started getting really worked up about it because I just thought, wow, is this how normal people get to feel every single day? Because I had struggled with insomnia for various reasons, whatever, but no doctor could ever figure it out pretty much my entire life. And I had this revelation in that moment. And I truly believe had I not gotten that one good night's sleep, I'd still be working as a professor. I truly believe that. Maybe not, but so I decided in that moment that I needed to quit my job. When I went to bed the night before, I had no intention of quitting my job. This is not something that I passively thought about it because I was really burnt out, but I was not planning on doing it. And I had no plan B in place so passively that I never ever thought, what would I do if I did quit my job? So I hit up my department chair that day because I thought, if I don't do this now, like I'm going to lose the courage because I really need to change my life. And this is the time. It's like having a baby. There's no good time if you say like, when's the best time to have children? So I told him and he was shocked. And all my colleagues, everybody was very shocked. And the thing is, I had already been working, a tenured college professor, but I could not make my bills. I'd been working at the same place for 17 years and I worked a weekend job as a receptionist at a spa. That's really disheartening. I was tired and I just never had any money. I didn't even have debt. But I think my circumstance, it's not that every college professor or everybody where I worked maybe wasn't paid well enough. I don't believe I was paid well enough. And I mentioned a gender pay gap possibility to my dean years before. But I'm divorced. So when you're kind of single momming and you're divorced, your expenses, everything is different. So it's a little harder that way. I think if I had still been married, it would have been fine. But as a divorced person, it was not fine. And so that happened. I had to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Fortunately, I gave notice in January, but I was going to work through the end of the semester, which was mid-May. So I had a little time to kind of figure it out. And my initial plan was to go to esthetician school because I worked at that spa and I saw how happy these women were and what a zen environment it was. I still work there when they need me. If they call me up, I'm working there this Saturday because to me it's fun and I like helping when people need help. And I told the owner there, I said, I might be a millionaire one day, but I'm still going to work here because I love you guys. I actually applied to esthetician school and I did a tour. I took a test. I put down a deposit. I did all that. And because those women were working a 4-day work week, loving what they did, super zen, didn't have to take their work home with them. And they were making more money than me as a college professor. I was like, do this, be really fun. I could be licensed and working in 6 months. So that happened. But then 2 weeks later, I was talking to my therapist about it. And my therapist said, oh, I laughed because she really gave it the perspective I needed. She said, I didn't know skincare was your dream. That's exactly what she said. And I laughed out loud because to me, when it was articulated like that, it sounded absurd to me. And I just said, it's not. And she said, Okay, hold up. What is your dream then, Sarah? Do you even know what your dream is? If you could do anything, what would you do? And I honestly hadn't really thought about it. So I started thinking about it, and I decided that what I really loved about my job was I loved researching and writing, but I was kind of tired of scholarly researching and writing. And I just wanted to do things that were more creative and just more suited to my personality. Though I will say I consider all writing an act of creative writing. So even in my scholarly writing, I would do like linguistic play things that I would crack myself up and tried to write as creatively as I could, even with scholarly stuff. I had a lot of experience just presenting at conferences. I published a book. I have a million publications as an academic. The teaching takes up a lot of time, though, and there's a lot of administrative things as well. So I always felt like the writing part was the most stressful part of academia because there's the dictum publish or perish in academia. Like you have to be publishing or you're going to lose your job if you're at that kind of an institution. But that was the thing that I always felt just always got pushed to the wayside. And so I decided, okay, I know what publishing companies are like. I know what a racket it is and how you just can't really make any money on books unless you're famous. And it's very difficult to get published via traditional publishers. So that is how Mod Couple Publishing was born. I just decided I would start my own publishing company as a means to publish my own work, but also eventually help people who were good writers and who wanted to be published but weren't interested in self-publishing and just wanted a name and wanted somebody who knew the inner workings and could do all the admin and figure all that stuff out. I have some things in the works right now. I do have a couple people who are not me, who I will be publishing their work soon. And so that happened. I had to also decide what I was going to write about because I think a lot of people just assumed I was going to keep doing academic stuff. And I just said, hell no, I'm not doing that. I had to figure out, okay, what do I know about? What do I really feel confident talking about? I made a joke to someone. I laughed, maybe to my therapist. I said, I could talk about my anxiety all day. And I think that's kind of what happened where I realized, yeah, I know a lot about anxiety and trying to work through childhood trauma and PTSD and all these things and always making fun of myself. Self-deprecating humor has always been my coping mechanism. And that's kind of how Sarcrasstic Self Care was born. I decided that okay, yeah, I'm going to write books about anxiety, but all the books out there that I'm reading that are true self-help books are just too serious. You have some really funny ones out there, but they're not necessarily steeped in the science. They're humor. They're meant to be humor. And so I was really trying to marry self-help honestly made me cringe, but I just thought if I could do it humorously, maybe self-help humor might be interesting. I started that Instagram account as just mental health humor. I did not know that I had ADHD yet, but I hate social media too. And so even though I'm on all the things and I have a personal Instagram account that I had since 2010 or 11 and Facebook since the dawn of Facebook and all that stuff, I've never been super consistent with social media. I also didn't want a business that was dependent on social media. So I decided to just kind of do it for fun, but I made it a business account. Sarcrasstic is just a combination of the words sarcastic and crass, which is how I've always seen myself. Very sarcastic, but I've gotten better because sarcasm can be really cruel. And my new thing is optimistic sarcasm, that sarcasm can be kind and that self-deprecating humor can be a really positive thing so long as you don't take it too far. Because when you take it too far, it just makes people get really uncomfortable because if you are talking too negatively about yourself, you don't come off as confident and funny anymore. You come off as sad. And so I started Sarcrasstic Self Care, I think in April, and I posted a couple things. I think I posted like a Kermit the Frog meme or It took me a few months to actually decide to get on there and start doing my own thing and show up with any consistency. So I kind of took baby steps, started getting my feet wet there, and the thought occurred to me that I should make that a brand. That should be the series of books, because I had a lot of ideas for books that would fall under that umbrella. So I started thinking about branding and what's my mission and who am I? And then all these things happened all at once, basically. I started writing the book that I have out now in April, and I finished it in June. It just really kind of poured out of me. But at the end of June, my dad got a cancer diagnosis, and I basically put my entire life on hold, started traveling every week to Virginia. My sisters and my brother live up there where he lived, and just to help with doctor's appointments. He declined really fast, and nobody expected him to decline as fast as he did. So that was happening. And simultaneously, as I was engaging more on Instagram in Sarcrasstic Self Care, I was looking at a lot of ADHD and autism content, because both of my kids have those diagnoses. And they're older. My son is about to turn 23 in a couple weeks, and my daughter is 18. But I was just interested in that stuff because they had struggled their entire lives and both ended up having to do homeschooling and just were always square pegs in round holes. And I always kind of felt that way too. I never doubted that I was neurodivergent, but I just didn't think about this in the context of myself. That while I was, sort of diving into just helping my dad out around the house and in Virginia, I started just getting nonstop ADHD content in my feed, because once you start, your algorithm changes. And I started seeing content about adult ADHD, and I just didn't even know that adult ADHD was a thing. I was so ignorant about it. Even though I had read and knew things, and both my kids had been in therapy and they'd gone through official assessment, I just always thought of it as a kid's thing. Eventually, I could not deny. I reached a point around the same time that I was just helping my dad out and he was getting really sick. I just finished the book. I reached a point where I just one day was looking at some content on Instagram, and I just could not deny any longer. I felt like I was looking in the mirror, and I just had this explosion, and I just thought, oh my God, like, I have ADHD. Oh my God. Oh my God. Like, what do I do? How is this possible? And then I started reading more and more about it, and then it became super clear. And I have had the same therapist for about 7.5 years now. So I went to her and I said, I don't even think I know I have ADHD, and I want to go through a diagnosis. Like, I want to do formal diagnosis. Maybe. I wasn't even sure, because I thought, what is the whole point? What would be the benefit of going through that at my age? Because I am 52. And I just thought, is there really a point to that? For my kids, they needed accommodations and school and stuff like that. But what would be the point for me? And I just decided that I wanted to do it because I wanted to know. I just needed to know for sure. I got my formal ADHD diagnosis in August while my dad was still just going through doing some chemo, but that wasn't working. I just, for fun, started a little Etsy shop as a hobby, designed all these ridiculous glassware, fell down a rabbit hole. I designed some mid-century modern glassware for fun and all random things. And then my dad just declined really fast, like over a 2-week period. He just wasn't the same person. And he died on September 5th. And that just really rocked my world in a way that of course, like anybody dying who you're close to, is hard. And my mom had already passed away in 2020. I've had many, sadly, friends die in my lifetime. And so I had experienced death many times in people that I was close to. But my dad passing away, I think it was probably the combo of just him and how awesome he was, but then also that feeling of, okay, my siblings and I are now orphaned, and it doesn't matter how old you are. He was old, but it doesn't matter. It still sucked. It sucked in a way that I still just can't fathom. When I still marvel at it, like, why? How is it so hard? Even like it's May now, how is it still so damn hard? But it is. And that made me press pause on everything. But it was good in a way. I just spent a lot of time with my siblings and just kind of gave myself grace. And since I had gotten that diagnosis, there was a period of grief about the diagnosis, but I did not linger there. I grieved hard for what things could have been, how I could have been a better mother, how I could have been better at everything in my life had I known. And that may be true, but in the end, I didn't find out. I didn't know. And I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge that I have now and building on that knowledge every day. So yeah, I had to spend a lot of time sitting with myself and grieving. And I really leaned on, that's when I really started diving into Sarcrasstic Self Care on Instagram and actively starting to make friends there and meet people and connect with people. And in the fall, I probably had 200 followers. I know in January I had 550 and I have 3,850 now. So I had this huge period of growth just this past spring. But, back then I didn't really know anybody. So I just started getting to know people. And that made me realize that I was not alone. I've met so many women, middle-aged women from around the world who are late diagnosed ADHD and who basically kind of, you just feel like you're living parallel lives with people. So it's pretty remarkable. So I really leaned on those people a lot and kind of just sat around and was sad and tried to do little bits of work. But, my book was set to be published in July or August. And so obviously that was put on hold. But with the ADHD diagnosis, that just rocked my world too. So I ended up not completely rewriting the book, but I rewrote a lot of it and I changed a lot of it based on that new knowledge. And finally kind of reached a point around December, January, where I just thought, okay, I am still grieving. This is still really hard, but I need some distraction and I need to start making some money because I am broke and this is paralyzing me and I need to start moving. I need to make a plan to move forward. So I did rework the book and I had been taking little publishing courses and teaching myself about business. I'd never had my own business. That was hard. I've learned a lot, but also about publishing. Here's the thing. This is where the punkpreneur thing comes in. On Sarcrasstic Self Care, I talk a lot about punk and punk ethos and just how punk is, sure, it's a genre of music, but it's not just really about music. It's about going against the grain. It's about radical authenticity. It's about questioning authority and doing things your own way and also doing things yourself, the whole DIY aesthetic. It's a way of life, really. So I thought if I'm going to be, CEO of my own company, I need to know how to do every single thing that this company will do. Even if I eventually sub it out, I need to know the inner workings. I want to be on the front lines and I actually want to do everything. Now, I'm not completely delusional. If there's something that I come to that I just can't do, or what I produce from it is just, am I allowed to curse on this podcast? Is just shit, then I am going to take that under advisement and find the proper professionals to do. An example of that is graphic design, for example. I did design my book cover. I will say I did what all the business and publishing courses told me to do. They said, you're the author, you're the writer, you're the publisher, you do your thing, but you need to have other people just sub this out, find someone to format the book, find someone to design a cover, find someone to do this, do that. And I did hire somebody. I hired a pro to design my cover and eventually paid that person for edits and tried to get my vision across. But in the end, I didn't like it. I was just, this is my company, and over my dead body, am I going to put my book out with that? I don't like it. So I didn't use it, and I started experimenting with that. I did that by myself. And the formatting too. I bought my own formatting software, and I thought, how hard can this be? That's one thing academia gave me. I've just been able to keep up with a lot of technology and that stuff. It's all intuitive to me. Anytime I have some new software, it never feels hard to me. And formatting my book, if I'm being honest, it was easy. It was really easy and it's beautiful. It did not take me long to figure it out. There's a learning curve with your first time. So next time, if I want to format any subsequent book, it's going to be way easier. So when I talk about punkpreneur, that's what I mean. Like I in the most literal sense, did everything, every single thing for this book. The only thing that I didn't know how to do that I subbed out as well initially, I didn't know how to create the file that would have the flat book cover that you would have to with the spine and all of that. And so I hired someone to do that. The person who I hired, though, was in a 12-hour away time zone. I don't hold it against that person at all. They eventually got the job done, but I was tired of misunderstandings and miscommunications. And so eventually I ended up doing that myself too. They gave me the file that they corrected and created a couple days after I was already like, I'm done. My book's live. I did this all by myself and I figured it out. So I don't have to hire anybody to do that anymore either. Yeah. So the whole idea of punk, just doing everything yourself and going against the grain and sort of, yeah, I'm doing this my way. It might not be the most conventional way, but I've also learned that with an ADHD brain, it makes a lot more sense for me because I always have kind of done things in a different way. And so I don't know if anybody else has used the word punkpreneur. I'm sure somebody has said that before me. I say the same thing with punkpreneur that I say with the word sarcrasstic. I like to think that I made it up. Pretty sure I did not make it up. Pretty sure I'm not the first person to say that. But with sarcrasstic, what I will say is that I had another Instagram account years before that had sarcrasstic in the name. And if you look in the Urban Dictionary, sarcrasstic is in the Urban Dictionary because I put it there. Yes, it exists because I put it there. There's that. Punkpreneur, I should probably add punkpreneur to the Urban Dictionary if it's not already there. So I was calling myself a solopreneur, which everybody in the entrepreneurial world is familiar with. If you're sole proprietor of your LLC or whatever, and you're the only one, then that's one thing. But I decided, you know what? Everything I have done in my business thus far, I have done by myself. No one has done anything for me. And I am so damn proud of that. Even my other income streams, I consider this is what I've been thinking. Okay, this is where we diverge a little bit, Desiree. This is where it gets complicated and where I feel conflicted. And this is what I'm going to call the punkpreneur paradox. I know you know all about the Amazon influencer program, that kind of stuff. I do that because it is easy and it is earning me really quick, easy income that is little by little becoming more and more passive so that I can spend more time doing the things that I want to do. I also put my book on Amazon. It will be available in other marketplaces eventually, but I started on Amazon because that's where the world is now. And for better or for worse, even if I am not completely happy about enabling late stage capitalism. I mean, honestly, I want to add to my Instagram for under my bio. I am seriously tempted. I want to do it as a social experiment. I want to write whore for late stage capitalism because that's what I feel like. And I feel like punk is sort of anti-establishment. And I feel so conflicted calling myself a punkpreneur. Or I imagine that at some point, someone's going to say to me, how can you call yourself punk when like you're working for the man? And I'm like, you know what? The man is working for me too. I'm getting something out of this deal and you can look at it from both ways. And I have to do what I have to do to survive. And if this is what it is right now, this is what it is. But ultimately, I'm doing it all by myself. I am one person and I am making a living. I am not rich. I have debt now. I still cannot pay my bills, but I believe that I am on my way to doing that. I am so much happier and so much less stressed not working in academia anymore. I did not work in a toxic environment. Lots of higher education environment in the United States in particular are very toxic. I was very fortunate. I worked at a wonderful university that wasn't perfect, but I had wonderful colleagues. I miss it for those connections. And I really loved teaching. I missed those human connections, but I don't miss feeling like I had to be on 24/7 and just never feeling relaxed. Just the work never ended. So I don't miss that at all. And I have zero regrets. Zero. Not even like 1%.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. That is awesome. Sarah, thank you so much for walking us through that journey. And there's so much in there that you shared and really there's points in there that I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to just jump in, but I didn't want to interrupt you because what you shared is so important for the listeners to hear. It's the journey that we have to go through in our life. And just one thing I want to talk about, you said, I kind of wish I had known about the ADHD before, so
Mhm.
I could have done things differently. And I know that there's so many of us that wish we could have done things
Yeah,
differently, but it wasn't meant to be that way.
exactly. Yep.
And it's hard to accept sometimes, but if we can recognize that these steps had to be taken to bring us to where we are now, it's like we
Yeah.
can come to some acceptance about it. But I want to dig into the ADHD portion of this because this is mainly the topic that we were going to be discussing, and that's the late diagnosis that you received, being now that you're in midlife. Like, what has this meant for you? And what was the testing like? And was it difficult? And now that you know, what has the change been like for you in your life? And so share that with us, please.
Well, one thing, the testing and the assessment was not difficult for me. It was way easier. My kids had to go through this whole battery of stuff. Fortunately, I'm with a therapist who I've been with for a very long time. She knew, I mean, when I told her I wanted to get assessed, she laughed and she said, "Oh, I knew you had ADHD the minute you walked in my door." And because a lot of my friends said, "You'd think your therapist would have caught that." And I said, "I'm sure she did. But the reason I started therapy with her in the first place was it was triaging just the immediate chaos in my life, which was independent of that. I had a lot of things to work through. I had a lot of other work to do, but it wasn't hard for me because she already knew, and it was really easy for us to sit down and go through the DSM-5, and it was very obvious. I think also I'm so old now that I know who I am, whereas you ask kids all these questions, and it can be confusing, and the multiple choice question too, or would you say it's more this way or that way? And they don't know how to answer those things always with confidence. And so the assessment process for me was probably as quick and easy as it could be. I connected my therapist with my primary care physician, and the same thing with getting medication. I think she knew too. From I've had the same primary care physician for over 20 years. She knew. And they consulted, and they both not just encouraged, knowing me so well, they both recommended to me. I hesitated. I wasn't really interested in trying meds for ADHD. I was already taking an SSRI that I'm still on that I would like to taper off if possible. But and I'd been on lots of different SSRIs in my adult life that I had struggled to get off of. It was really difficult, and nothing ever really worked. The funny thing is the one I'm on now is also known for combating multiple ADHD symptoms, even though it's an antidepressant, anti-anxiety med. And so that's probably why that was the one that finally felt like it helped some. But I think, yeah, it wasn't hard for me. I don't take that for granted because I have a lot of international friends now going through diagnostic and assessment themselves from other countries. I see how difficult it is for women in the UK and in Australia, and all of the paperwork and all of the hoops that you have to jump through, and how I have multiple friends who have been doing this for years and they still don't have an official diagnosis. It's really maddening. A lot of it's just partially luck and who you happen to be working with, your geographic region. A lot of doctors and therapists actually don't know a lot about ADHD, and they still think of it as a thing that little boys have, a problem that little boys have. This is a really big deal. So the research in ADHD has just increased exponentially, and for adult ADHD in particular in the past 20 years. I mean, it has evolved so much, even in the past 5 and 10 years for adults. What we used to think is that ADHD was a behavioral problem. We just thought it was a behavioral problem. It was often 20, 30 years ago, it was associated with bad parenting. Parents were blamed for it. It was associated with the dawn of the internet. It was like, oh, ADHD going up. It was associated with too much screen time, all of these things. And now what we know, we have the hard science, we have the evidence and tons of it, and it is all well established now that ADHD is a neurological, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. an ADHD brain is literally wired differently. And what it comes down to is a lot of people will call it a dopamine deficiency. My understanding is that it's not as much a dopamine deficiency, which is that happy hormone that in the reward center of your brain that makes you get pleasure out of whatever. My understanding, I'm not the scientist, I'm not the doctor, so I don't quote me on this, is that it's less about an initial dopamine deficiency and more about ADHD brains using dopamine, their body's natural dopamine, at a faster rate. So we run out faster. I think the behavioral thing, we always associated that with the word hyperactive little boys. Girls have fallen through the cracks. And that's why there are so many women now getting diagnosed, because what we now know is that the hyperactivity does actually exist. It's counterintuitive, but it does actually exist in girls and women, but that it is more internal. It's internal hyperactivity. It is a hyperactive brain. So while boys look like they've just done a line of coke and they're just like bouncing off the walls and like kicking over chairs, the way that we're seeing that it's manifested in girls is more in compliance. They're actually the opposite. They are perfectionists. They want to do well. They are people pleasers. They want to be the teacher's pet, or they want everybody to like them. They want to get straight A's. So that's just a lot of newer research that we have now that we know. I think there's 30-something official symptoms in the DSM-5, and I think you only need to exhibit, I want to say it's like maybe 6 to get an official diagnosis. And I think there are 3 or 4 different types of ADHD, and it's complex, and we're still learning. It feels good to know that you're not broken. I thought my entire life, I just thought, why am I such a freaking hot mess all the time? Not that anybody knew that, because that's what we do. We mask. We have to fit into this neurotypical society and the way that neurotypical brains work and their timelines. And so we fake it till we make it. The problem is that, do we ever really make it? I am apt to say I did a really great job of fooling people. I do have great acting skills, and people thought that I had it all together. People thought I had it all. My colleagues constantly in academia, they constantly called me a rock star, and they called me a visionary. I was like the quirky creative one who like made everybody laugh, but I never won a teaching award. I think I just was a little too kooky and too disorganized and too, I don't know, not the kind of person who, no matter how much the students loved me and said I was awesome, I wasn't the person that was going to win the prizes. A little too weird, just a little too much. And yeah, it's been an interesting ride. Now I just think of it as I was never a hot mess. I just had ADHD. That's all. Not broken, just different. I don't like the word disorder because I feel like disorder is relative. I feel like, of course, I'm disordered to a neurotypical capitalistic society. I do see a difference, though, between disordered and disabled. Do I see myself as disabled? ADHD has been extremely disabling for me. It's an invisible disability, obviously, but it still is disabling. And even though I do take medication now, there is no cure for ADHD. That doesn't mean that I'm cured. It doesn't mean that my problems are solved. I still struggle, but I have found that medication, as much as there's a lot of stigma around medication, and I hesitated, like I just told you, it has helped me enormously. And I'm really grateful to have access to it. And everyone has to take care of themselves and make those choices for themselves. And so I respect anybody who doesn't want to go the medication route, obviously. But believe me, I've taken walks. I've gone to the gym. I've done breath work. I do therapy. I do mindfulness exercises. I've tried to meditate. I've done everything that people say, what my diet, I'm a vegetarian. Why just do this, just do that. You'll feel a lot better. Dude, do you think I have not tried all that shit a million times over and wondered, why the hell does this not work for me? What's wrong with me? And that's just reinforcing that whole idea of what is wrong with me? Why am I broken? Or why am I so stupid? Why don't all of these coping mechanisms and management solutions that work for other people, why aren't they working for me? What is wrong with me? And I think that's just where you have to do a complete mindset shift. That takes a lot of internal work to just flip the script and do a 180 and change your self-talk. That is not easy.
It's not. And Sarah, thank you for sharing all of this with us, the journey and the decisions. And you're absolutely right. Like these things that people suggest are fine. That's great for you. This is not happening in your brain the same way that things are happening. That we're different.
Yeah.
And yes, it's great. It works for you. And I'm so glad that's the case. But it hasn't worked for me. And I need to understand why. And there's nothing wrong with you. I love that so much. Like remembering different does not mean wrong. And then thank you so much for sharing it. The point that you made about taking medication and the stigma around that, I'm really hoping that it continues to lessen. The stigma about taking medication continues to lessen because it is something that is so helpful to so many people and can make the difference in their life. I love that you shared that, and maybe you didn't describe it quite this way, but it sounds like it sort of quieted some things that were happening in your brain to allow you to process differently.
Absolutely. No, it has absolutely quieted my brain. If there's one thing that has changed radically for me because of medication, and it comes off as ironic and it's counterintuitive because ADHD meds there's a bunch of different classes, but I do take stimulant meds. It's a very controlled substance. If you don't have an ADHD brain and you take stimulants, you are going to be bouncing off the walls. Your heart rate is going to be way up. You're going to be just wired. And these stimulant meds, what they do for people with really chaotic brains is it quiets your brain down. I am getting, finally, the best sleep of my entire life. And sleep, more than exercise and more than diet, sleep is the root. It's on the pyramid of well-being. It's at the top. If you don't have your sleep, you have nothing. It doesn't matter if I have a six-pack of abs and I'm vegan and have the best diet in the world. I am going to be clinically insane if I don't get good sleep. This is brand new for me. I marvel at it every night. When I put my head on the pillow, I just still can't believe that I am able to just flip that switch and turn my brain off and just go, okay, time for bed. Because I have spent most of my adult life just being up all night a lot, thinking about anything and everything and 20 different things at once with a soundtrack. And yeah, it's that part alone is why I don't want to lose access to this medication now.
Oh my gosh, for sure. This is just tremendous. And we've barely scratched the surface of this conversation. So I want you to share with us, like maybe some things that you really want the listeners to know about ADHD in diagnosis, in girls and women, and who should they talk to? Anything that you think is really important that the listeners should know. And I mean, that can go in 100 different directions, but maybe what are 2 or 3 things that you can think of that's really important that they should know right now?
For one thing, I think that I will say in my mind, self-diagnosis is valid. I think if you think you have ADHD, you probably do. I mean, and who really wants that? But a lot of people, there's a trend right now of, oh, ADHD is a trend. People are just using it as an excuse to be lazy. You don't want ADHD. You don't want it. But here's the thing. Why I say, and clinicians would disagree with me for various reasons. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a professional. I only say that self-diagnosis is valid because diagnosis is a privilege. It costs a lot of money, and you have to have access to the resources, to quality healthcare, people that actually believe you when you say, I think I have this, because a lot of people just get shut down immediately. When they go to seek diagnosis, people refuse to even assess them because they're like, no, you don't have it, even if you actually want to pay for it. So there are multiple levels of privilege associated with, and financial, especially with formal diagnosis. But I would say with women in particular, more women are coming out of the closet and being late diagnosed ADHD because they are in perimenopause. And now we're starting to do more and more research about women and perimenopause and because basically your estrogen levels decline significantly from perimenopause on through the rest of your adult life as women, and estrogen also depletes your dopamine. So if you already have a dopamine deficiency from ADHD, those estrogen levels plummeting, and as a byproduct, more dopamine being stripped from you is going to make you feel even crazier than if you were just experiencing the craziness that is perimenopause or menopause or postmenopause or whatever. So a lot of women don't realize they have ADHD, or they are like, what is happening to me? I'm going insane. And their doctor might say, oh, wow, yes, you're perimenopausal, but you also may have ADHD. So there's that. I would just encourage anybody to talk to their healthcare providers immediately to see what resources are available. And that if you have healthcare providers who don't listen to you and who are discounting you, find new ones. Life is too short for not having people in your corner. I don't even care if you've been with that person for 20 years. If they're saying, oh, you're just depressed, or they're just not listening to you, and you feel in your gut that something is wrong, you need to find somebody else. And I can't stress that enough. You need to find someone who will listen to you. Otherwise, there are lots of, like you said, there are lots of resources out there. There are lots of books that you can read. The godfather of adult ADHD is Russell Barkley. There are so many books out there on ADHD now that are like, my book isn't even about ADHD, but it's omnipresent because I have it. But Russell Barkley is clinical. I want to say he's a psychiatrist at Virginia Commonwealth University, and he's a researcher, and he specializes in ADHD, and he's written multiple books, and it's what he spends his life doing now. He's been doing this forever and ever, and he is really well known for his book, Taking Charge of ADHD, which was more for children, but he has a book now that's taking charge of adult ADHD. And he really goes to bat for people, the naysayers that, ADHD doesn't exist, or ADHDers are lazy, or, it's a behavioral issue. He is the man. And I can't recommend his work enough. It's heavy because he's the real science, but if you want to start with just some other people that are a little lighter, you can just go to Amazon. There's a ton of books out there with great reviews on ADHD and written by a variety of people who are clinicians and otherwise.
Thank you for making that recommendation, and I'll include the information in the show notes. Before we get any further, I want you to share your book with us, Sarah. So do you have a copy you want to show the viewers on YouTube, and you can tell us the title of the book for the listeners of the podcast? I would love to have you do that now.
Yeah, okay. Yes, this is the book, and it is called The Overthinking Chronicles. It's got a long subtitle, which is Cultivating Your Inner Comedian to Reframe Anxiety, Spark Self-Compassion and Trust, and Give Self-Doubt the punchline it deserves. It is available on Amazon only right now, but will be probably end of summer. You'll be able to find it at Barnes & Noble, or if your local bookseller chooses to carry it. It is in ebook format, so you can get it in the Kindle store. You don't need a Kindle to read the ebook. You can read it on any device, and it is in paperback and hardback. I'm about to start recording the audiobook. I'm going to narrate the audiobook myself, so it will be available on Audible pretty soon too, which honestly, I'm hoping that helps boost my sales a lot, because my audience, the ADHD crowd, we're kind of known for having difficulty processing information and just not being able to focus when we read. And so I feel like, yeah, the audiobook is where my people are. So that should be available in the next couple months as well.
Congratulations. That's excellent. And something that I just remembered is the audio. It's like listening to the book being read while you're reading the book at the same time. And so it's like you're getting it from two different mediums. Your vision, you're seeing it, reading the words, and then you're hearing it. It's auditory, right? So it's getting absorbed into your brain. And so I think that's fantastic. So congratulations. And I'm excited. And I'll include your book information in the show notes as well. Is there any other books that you want to suggest, or podcasts that you think would be influential or beneficial for the listeners?
I am going to give a shout out to there are so many podcasts, and I could name a bunch. I'm just going to name one, because I feel if I name two, then, but why couldn't you just throw in that third one? I'm just going to give a shout out to the OG, my favorite, admittedly, and it's the one that's really gotten me through since August. It's called ADHD AF. It started out as a couple of friends who were up in Aberdeen, Scotland, and they are late diagnosed ADHD women. And I think they started their podcast in May 2022, maybe. Dawn stopped the collaboration with Laura, I think, just in recent months to just go back to school and pursue her studies. And so Laura is doing the ADHD AF podcast solo now, and she is an activist and doing such amazing work, but it is really a podcast where they focus on late diagnosed women in particular, but it's branched out into all encompassing ADHD now. But I think initially they really focused on the fact that they were AFAB, assigned female at birth, and that's their experience, and that they're not experts. It's all based on a lived experience, which is, what I say in my book as well. But it's enlightening. It's funny. The podcast it's just renowned now, so that they are really getting the most reputable expert in the field on there. Yeah, that's my go-to for ADHD. There are lots and you can find them, but I'll just give that shout out to ADHD AF.
That's excellent. That's a great recommendation. I think especially for this topic, for somebody to go check out that podcast, it's ideal. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I'll put that information in the show notes as well. But lastly, Sarah, before we close out, I would love for you to share where people can find you to follow along your journey. And also if they have questions they want to ask you, maybe pick your brain on some of this a little bit, how would they be able to find you?
The easiest way to find me is just via Instagram. It's sarcrasstic.self.care. And I do check my DMs daily. And I also do look at the requests. If you're in my sort of junk DMs, I do check those, not daily, but I notice them. You can do what I do. If I know that probably something I have DM'd somebody has gone to junk, I comment on one of their posts and say, I sent you a DM and I think it's probably just in your junk. And then that you can always do that as well. But that's the quickest way to get in touch with me. I am really happy to have a job now where I just don't look at my email every day anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Good for you. Well, thank you for sharing that Instagram with us. I'll include that information in there as well. Sarah, this has been fantastic. And I mean, we could talk for another hour easily. There's so much more to this topic, but I think you've given us such great information just in what you've shared. So thank you for your time and your knowledge on this and your experience, which has been just tremendous. So thank you again for coming on the show. I so appreciate it.
You're so welcome. It was really fun. I appreciate you a lot for having me on. And I didn't even say the F word once.
You're welcome to do that now to close out the show if you want.
But I'm going to exercise restraint. I'm really proud of myself. This is like a moment for me.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you again, Sarah. We'll talk more soon.
Okay. Thanks, Desiree.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.